So just wanted to connect with you on a call like this. I think it'd be really helpful for tennis players struggling with tennis elbow with your background and your expertise in terms of adjusting rackets. I think especially you have an expertise in the handle, right? Like
Correct.
that's what you're specialized in handle development. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually yeah, that's definitely always been my focus. Let's say when I've worked with major manufacturers over the years is in the handle, correct sizing to as much dampening and aspects like that that we can come up with.
Yeah. And then could you briefly just go over your background?
Briefly,
If
you got
possible,
the
yeah.
you got the
If
long
possible,
version.
yeah.
A material engineer by trade who was stringing on tour prior to that. Didn't really feel at the time when I got out of school that it was interesting to build bridges or some other along that career path. So I stayed in the tennis industry, eventually into where I worked for a bunch of major manufacturers as design engineer, creating rackets, creating string, creating product for them, both from usually on a CAD, and then we would figure out a mold and things, fly to China or wherever our factory was, sit in the factory for a few weeks to get the production running, make sure the production's okay, and then go. And as well as always taking care of all the pro players that those companies sponsored. So fine
Mhm.
tuning their equipment to their needs, which a lot of times would trickle down to a consumer as well. So we
Yeah.
usually have a bigger budget when you're trying to take care of the top players. And a lot of times what you learn, you can then filter that back into retail product.
Yeah. So I guess my next question would be, you specialize in the handle and the grip. Why is grip so important?
Hopefully, it's our only contact with the racket. We do hit ourselves in the head and the foot sometimes, but being that it's the only contact point we have, and you are basic physics, we're putting something in motion. We're putting a racket in motion to hit another device, which is a ball traveling at its own rate in motion, and there's a initial contact that happens. So as you know, we have shock first, and then after the shock comes vibration. So the handle takes the majority of the brunt of that. So your hand becomes the dampener, so to speak. So if we
Mhm.
can help alleviate some of that initial shock, so be it. That's always been a major point. And unlike other racket sports, or not racket sports, let's say, but other like sports where we hit a ball like golf and whatnot, we have such a different dynamic. Golf, you got a hard metal hitting a hard composite ball.
Mhm.
Where in tennis, we've got a much larger surface. So we have three different sweet spots, but where we typically, as tennis players, when we hit the ball where it feels clean, we don't do that very often. So anytime we hit a little off center, we drastically increase that twist, the torque, the shock, the vibration, and those things. So it all again relates back to what you're hanging on to. If it's like the size of a pencil and you hit it off center, you're not going to be able to hold it without squeezing. And
Yeah.
when we squeeze, our arm is, as you would know, you much better know than me, but your arm is mostly a lot of tendons, and the tendons don't like that.
Yep. Yep. A lot of overuse injuries because of that repetitive strain. And what are those forces? I'm sure you looked into it a lot in the lab, analyzed the forces going on through the racket into the hand. Could you talk about a little bit of that and maybe some of the challenges of dampening that shock that you feel through the racket?
Yeah, and again, it's a very very different sport where we've got key factors involved. Where we have a 58-gram tennis ball moving at X rate of speed, but it is a rubber ball, so it carries a lot of its own energy. We're hitting a very stiff, solid, not solid, but a very stiff piece of graphite nowadays, which has inside of that a string bed. So we've got like three different factors going on, where that string is going to absorb most of that initial ball energy and then feed it all back, while the frame is trying to keep that stable and everything from being too too unstable, I guess. So it all again, then it's almost like a pyramid where we all angle all of that force load down to one thing, which is the handle, where your hand is onto it. Uh, So it's very difficult to do much in the actual, like in the graphite and in the layup of a frame. You'll see a lot of marketing, and tennis world and golf world are unbelievable at marketing fairy dust. There's only so many parameters we can deal with, and the oscillations of the that racket frame are going to be much different than the oscillation of the string bed. So we try to grab it where we can grab it, which is in the handle area. Throat on down, let's say, in the heart of the racket down, we'll try. There's been a lot of attempts and a lot of things have done, and a lot of it works. Unfortunately, some of it that's really, really done well over the years came from smaller brands that didn't have the marketing ability or didn't know how good of a system they had. So they kind of got left by the wayside, where it's easier to throw fairy dust out there and say, no, it's inside the frame, where actually there's not much you can do with that. String then on its own, we have so many different properties, where it used to be all natural gut, which is still by far the greatest amount of energy in, energy out, the greatest for arm prevention, most power, most everything. With that, it's more expensive, but if you like to play tennis and you have any issues, it's foolish not to go that route. To where we go to the other end of the spectrum nowadays, the most popular being all polyester string, which is virtually, it's solid plastic. It's very boring to watch a production because it's just a big vat that heats up these plastic pellets, and it extrudes it out a little nozzle down a channel where it dries. It's rolled up and it's done. So we can use a more high quality pellet in the plastic, but there's not a lot of technology in how great we can be comparative to natural gut, which is on the average 15 small ribbons of the upper serosa of the intestine. So we've got all those factors going on, where with poly, and you see on the tour, you can see these guys hitting unbelievable topspin, which it does that because the poly is like a clothesline, where on the bending curve, when the ball hits it, it's a very loopy curve where the ball flattens out and they can create a lot of spin. But the residual vibration and initial shock is much greater than on natural gut, where you get more of a pocket, where it's almost like a slingshot. It'll grab the ball and not flatten the ball as much and return a lot higher percentage of energy. So with all these factors going on, racket, frame, string, the ball, all of those things, everything comes back to the grip, which makes it even now more important. If we're too small, rarely too big, and material. Grip is extremely important to have a high COR, or coefficient of friction. The more friction is good. That means you have to squeeze less. You've got a good, let's say you have a good sticky grip and it fits your hand well. So that you don't have to squeeze as hard. If your grip gets old and it's wet, or it's the wrong material for you, it's going to be slippery and you're going to have a tendency to squeeze harder. Squeezing harder, it just shoots more of that right up to your elbow, through your wrist to your elbow. Everyone has a different pH in their body. So it's kind of weird, where you can take an overgrip, let's say Turner grip, for example. It's been around forever. It's very clothy, the blue grip. Some people, they love it. It absorbs a lot of moisture because it's made out of recycled paper. Some people, with their pH, it feels extremely slippery to them. And vice versa on, let's say, like a white tacky overgrip. Some people feel it's great. Some people feel it's slippery. So there's not one perfect grip for everybody as far as that goes. It's just in your pH balance, and try to tell players, like, make sure you wash your hands first. Ladies, don't use a lot of lotion. And it is an overgrip. It costs under 50 cents a piece. It's made to be used one time. Regrip your racket after your use.
It's cheaper than getting an elbow surgery.
It definitely is, because what it'll do is the main grip on a racket, the base grip, which typically now there's almost no more leather coming from the factory, but let's just stay with what's most common, being the base grip of a synthetic grip. That grip is going to create a moisture barrier between that and the overgrip. When you sweat, it's not really going to absorb much moisture comparative to other products. So if you leave that overgrip on after you've been sweating, you throw your racket in your bag and you go to play next time, it possibly is still wet underneath where you don't feel it. and it's just going to start to just rot and decay that PU material of the base grip.
Got it.
Pretty common, like in hot areas like Texas, Florida, things like that.
And how often should somebody be changing their overgrips?
I tried it with players in where it's hot. I try to, first of all, most overgrips look just ridiculous. They're very old. They're very dirty. They're just a quick Band-Aid. So I try to tell them, like, get in the habit of, after you play tennis, take the overgrip off, put your racket in your bag. You have to go home or whatever. Take your racket out and let that base grip dry, and then get in the habit of, if you regrip your racket before you go back to play. And trying, when I work with a lot of younger kids, we try to explain to them that the overgrip is your racket's underwear. You should change it as often as you change your own. And that kind of, kids will chuckle a little bit. It's true. It makes a lot of sense to get that change. Sorry.
Perfect. And we talked about the size of the grip being very important. How do you determine somebody's ideal grip size?
One last comment on the other part as well. Every racket that's made in production comes gripped for a right-handed player. And you can easily see that when you hold the racket, the spining or the way that the grip is on, your fingers will meet that. Mm-hmm. And both sides of the racket feel really good because your fingers fit that spining. Players like myself that are left-handed, until you realize that you put the grip on the other way, left-handed, so your hands feel that way, the right-handed grip only feels kind of good on one side, feels terrible on the other, which can then get some bad habits and other things that are going to equate to arm issues as well. So if you're a lefty, definitely put your grips on left-handed. Even if you leave your base grip on right-handed, if you do your overgrip on left-handed, it's going to be much better. And the basics of that is, when you're holding the racket, you normally wrap the butt of the rackets here. If you go to the right, you're a right-handed player. If you go to the left, you're a left-handed player. And you can see it'll fit, the spines will fit your fingers. Grip size, then, importance-wise, dimension and size, we always typically try to go. You have a racket on here somewhere. If we hold a racket comfortably, like we're going to shake someone's hand, and if we turn that racket over and we try to look, my pinky should not touch my hand, either finger or palm. The perfect width should be where it's comfortably, not quite, but close to touching them. If I'm swallowing it like this, it's way too small for me. And if you were going to err, if you're somewhere in the middle, err on the larger size.
Yeah.
Being the fact of, if you've got a pickle jar, a big pickle jar, and you've got a little teeny ketchup jar, let's say, or whatever, can you open the bigger jar easier than you can open the little one? You just get more grip strength on surface contact with less effort.
Yep.
Most people are going to be and when you're too small and you squeeze too much, you tend to get too wristy. Then you don't use your arm correctly in the swing pattern. It just equates to a lot of factors that are bad. I mean, it's the squash shot, and then you know the racquetball shot. You know, in tennis, that's bad.
Yeah, perfect. So a lot of people overcomplicate the size factor of the racket handle.
They do, and again, there's a lot of weird marketing, and there's a lot of weird announcers on TV that should know better, that come up with claims of so-and-so pro players playing with really small grip size so you can hit more spin and this, and it's very rarely true. It just makes for good commentary at times, and you got to remember that the average player is not ATP WTA ready.
Yeah. All right. And my next question was going to be, let's say you get somebody coming into you with tennis elbow, and they're wondering what should they do with their racket. What are some things that you look at first, and maybe the top recommendations where the top factors in terms of what you would look at for a tennis elbow?
If it's someone I've never met or know nothing about, it'll be a quick analysis of just look, who are they? Okay, it's Susie, and Susie's 65. She loves to play ladies tennis, doubles every Tuesday at the club. She's played tennis for 20 years, so she kind of has an idea of the game, but she's, let's say, maybe, she's a little older. What racket is she using? Why did you buy that racket? Is it the correct basic fit for her? Did she buy a player racket when she needs more of a recreational, bigger head size racket? What's her grip size look like? What's her grip type look like? Just a basic overview of what she got in her hands. And then it's going to be, can you even swing the racket for me just once or twice or whatever? Do you ever take any lessons? Where's your pain? And, outside of my elbow, inside of my elbow. The first thing I'll say is, if you've got pain right now, forget the equipment part. You need to go get checked. Go see someone and get checked what's going on, because the nerve endings in that elbow, by the time you start feeling them, there's a lot of damage could have been done by now. So let's go see someone. Or do you take lessons? Maybe a lot of times, a lot of players that just have a sore arm without really terrible pain yet, where they're going to come to see someone like you, but they just go, man, I like to play tennis, but my arm gets sore when I play. It doesn't when I, for a day or two after, it's fine. I'm like, take a lesson. Go and learn how to hit the ball correctly first. And then we'll try to fit you for a racket that's good today, how you play today. This is most important for parents, because it's like, well, my kid's growing. He's going to be playing tennis. He'll be a lot better in a year. So we need to buy him a little better racket today. You're like, no, buy what works today. And if and when they grow out of it, we'll get something for them then, being that it better grips, a different grip size, a different type of racket, those kind of things. So mostly the people that walk in with an air cast or some kind of other device on their elbow, I'm like, you need to go get that looked at and diagnosed. I'm not a doctor, nor do I want to be, but I'm going to know enough to tell you, get it looked at before you keep playing, and don't mask it by putting something on there and listening to people saying, or just buy a shock absorber or whatever, which, if it would be great in physics, I think Elon Musk would hire us both if we could come up with a way that 2 grams of rubber is going to absorb the shock and vibration of a 350-gram racket.
Yep, exactly. So we had a good discussion on dampeners. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Sure. When we have a racket that's strong, I should have plenty of them around here. We have a racket when it's strung.
Mhm.
Ping, ping, ping. We have string under tension. It's like a guitar. The racket frame is hollow inside. You're going to hear the ping. All that is the oscillation of the string. It's the same as a guitar, and the body of the guitar makes the guitar string, makes a guitar string make a pitched noise depending on the tension. You can just put a rubber band in there. We hear nothing. All that's done is taking out the ping, ping, ping of the string. The amount of shock on impact is not reduced whatsoever. The amount of vibration is still coming down there. It's impossible for that to do any value or anything. Some people like the dead noise, like the old days of wood rackets didn't do that. If you like that deadness, use a dampener or just use a rubber band, where it's just as good. It's a lot cheaper. But the notion that it's going to do anything to prevent injury or cure injury is shame on those people.
Yep. You can't cheat the laws of physics.
You cannot cheat the laws of physics, and it's going to be much more expensive to totally rip your elbow or something apart and then learn the hard way.
Exactly. And then my last question was going into maybe what would be a myth, but you would know a lot better because you spent a lot of time on the tour with the top players. There's a notion that top players do not get tennis elbow. What's your thoughts on that? What have you seen with your experience?
Well, I've been doing this long enough that there was actually still wood rackets on tour. I used to string for Borg and Jimmy Arias and a lot of the guys that were the holdouts. Then we went through the metal racket phase before we went into the graphite phase. Everyone used gut, and back in the day, the players that had been around, they were a little long in the tooth. You'd see them in the locker room. They had ice bags, and those ice bags were on their knees, sometimes their shoulder, rotator cuff area, backs, ankles. That was it. Today, 16-year-old kids, you see more ice than ever. It's all on their wrist, their elbow. Um, on the pro tour, it's the same. The guys are they're getting a lot of elbow problems. The difficult part is, yes, if you're very good at tennis and you're at the pro level where you can hit some amazing shots, there are some ways to create a little more advantage with a smaller grip size. They can hit more topspin. Maybe they can be a little more wristy, which is not a normal player can't do that. And these guys and girls will sacrifice their body just to be able to have maybe a little more advantage at some point. The fact that also every one of those pro players, we restring their rackets. They change rackets every ball change. So every 7 games, they change rackets. So the string is completely fresh. It's not dead at all. And they can get away with it because they're just going to get a little more snap on the ball here or there. But they pay the price. They know their elbow and wrist is going to be hurting.
Perfect. So pro tennis players get tennis elbow as well. It's
quite a few of them. Yeah. And it's getting to be more. It used to be more of a trend. They would be outside elbow, and seeing a lot more guys now with the inside, which is really bad.
Yeah, with golfers elbow. Yep.
So it's out there. They're even, and you got to know those guys hit the ball so clean, and they'll still get that. They'll still get the problems, and they've got some of the best trainers on tour, and those guys, they're right from the court. They're right in there getting worked on.
I think a part of it also is how long the season is in the sport. They don't really get a break. Yeah.
No, it's so long. And you look at the season just being the tournaments. Now that's when they're not playing a match, they're on the court another couple hours every day, sometimes twice a day, especially off season. It's 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. They're hitting a ton of balls.
Yeah.
I mean, the best advice for someone that loves to play tennis, that it's not where they're making their money, they enjoy tennis, is find a racket, try racket, doesn't matter what the color, what the brand, who's using it, try a bunch of different rackets, find one that just feels good to you. Make sure you get the right grip size. If you have any history of any injuries, string with gut or even a hybrid, which means we use gut either just in the mains, which give you your power, or in the cross string, which will just give you a bigger sweet spot and a little more comfort. But string with a very comfortable string. Use new balls every time you play, and change your grips all the time, and you're gonna have a lot more fun. And it's an investment in your fun. We'll see. I have a neighbor who loves to golf like crazy. He's a member of the country club, which is not cheap. He's a terrible golfer. He probably loses at least a dozen balls every round, and he doesn't use a cheap ball. His wife plays tennis at the club, and he goes crazy when I tell her she needs a racket restrung every month because she plays tennis every day. And he's like, I'm not spending $25 on restringing every month. And I'm like, dude, you hit that many balls in the water yesterday. So. The enigma of tennis is sometimes harmful to those that play. You need to take care of your equipment. You need to take care of yourself. And even if it's a hobby player, they need to do some type of exercising and some type of preventiveness before they have to walk around with an ice bag.
We covered everything I wanted to cover here. Anything else you wanted to add in terms of these topics?
Let's see. Like in anything, there are professionals at their trade. We have back in like when did we start that? 1982. The United States Racket Stringers Association, which is the USRSA, which is now they're international as well. We've developed some certification processes where we train and test stringers from around the globe, and mostly here in the US, where they can either be a certified stringer, which is the first level, which is a very competency of knowing what they're doing and knowing equipment, to an MRT, which is a master racket technician, where those guys we take very deep into knowing everything, like you and I have been discussing. And they're very easy to find. usrsa.com. Find a stringer near me, and it shows a designation. It basically, what it is it's people that this is their job. They're not just doing this after school and they've got a machine and they don't know what they're doing and they just have, $10 and I'll get you taken care of. These are the best of the best. Typically, most of them have a shop located around. That if a consumer out there just asks, like, are you certified? And if they are, they're pretty much going to be in good hands. Just like going to a doctor or going to someone that's, accredited.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for this. Your expertise is incredible, and I hope people really enjoy this quick interview.
Yeah, anytime, anytime. Always here.